That evening, sitting alone in the little hotel room with Gary, I realized how shocking and unpredictable life could be. I was already anxious. My husband, Logan, had been abroad for several months in another city. I certainly missed him, but it wasn't just his absence that troubled me. It was his negligence, his lack of interest. That was the true problem. The lonely evenings were eating away at my soul. How could I have known that asking my stepson, Gary, to take me to his dad would result in the two of us being cooped up in a small hotel room with only one bed? What was going to happen eluded me. Allow me to recount every minute detail from the very beginning. I promise you, the conclusion of this narrative will be far more fascinating than you could ever imagine. That morning, as I was leaving the house, I caught a quick glance of myself in the mirror. I was tense, certainly, but I still looked fantastic. Even with Logan leaving me so alone, I still felt attractive, still felt alive. But even those sensations weren't enough anymore. They didn't satisfy me. Gary was finishing his breakfast in the kitchen when I called out from behind him. I know you're starting college at the end of the summer, but you still need to improve your driving. Come on, take me to your dad. He looked up at me with that same mischievous grin he always wore. Gary was a nice kid with a quirky, hilarious side, yet he could be such a little rascal at times. All right, stepmom, he said teasingly. But on one condition, tell Dad to get me a better car for the summer. We'll talk about it, I replied firmly, ushering him toward the door. Inside, though, all I was thinking was, let's just get this journey over with. But I had no idea the trip wouldn't go as planned. We had been driving for nearly 2 hours. I was in the back seat, fooling around on my phone while Gary sang along to some odd song on the radio, tossing out ridiculous jokes that made him chuckle. Then, all of a sudden, the car made a dreadful sound. A hiss. And then it died altogether. What's happening? I asked, trying not to sound too alarmed. I guess the car broke down, Gary murmured, pulling over to the side of the road, evidently frustrated. And just like that, we were stranded in the middle of nowhere. My phone signal was weak, and there was no one around to help. We spent 2 hours arguing, calling every mechanic we could find and attempting to fix the blasted thing. Finally, we had to accept the obvious. The only choice was to spend the night at the nearest hotel. At the motel reception, as Gary chatted with the person at the desk, I stood behind him, annoyed as hell. If Logan finds out about this, he's going to lose it, I thought. But curiously, at that moment, I didn't feel like it mattered all that much. Deep down, I simply knew that tonight was going to change things. Before this tale gets weirder, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss the rest of this. And by the end, I'd love to see your support in the comments and with those likes. When we finally got to our room and opened the door, all my expectations crashed and burned. The space was tiny, barely big enough to turn around in. One bed, one nightstand, and a weak, flickering overhead light that made everything look dreary. The ceiling felt low. The AC barely worked, and the single small window faced nothing but the parking lot. This is it? I mumbled, unimpressed. Gary stepped in behind me, chuckling. What were you expecting? A 5-star hotel? We're only here for one night. Relax, stepmom. The teasing tone in his voice, combined with his cheeky grin, only made my frustration worse. But at the same time, I couldn't deny that there was something about Gary's carefree, laid-back attitude that intrigued me. Being around him, even though I'd never admit it, stirred something inside me. A kind of exhilaration I didn't fully understand. This heat is killing me, I murmured, brushing the back of my neck. I need a shower, or I'm going to pass out. Certainly, certainly, Gary responded nonchalantly, throwing himself onto the bed and lying flat on his back. This is your domain, Carmen. Do whatever you need to feel at home. I gazed at him for a moment. His lean yet toned figure, combined with the subtle boyishness of his features, gave him an odd kind of attractiveness. But I quickly forced the thought out of my mind. He was Logan's son, after all. My stepson. I walked into the bathroom and slammed the door behind me. For a moment, I just stared at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was plastered to my skin from the heat, Yet I still looked nice. I still had that spark. Turning on the shower, I let the water run for a moment before stepping under it, hoping it would wash away the tangle of emotions rising inside me. I'm 47 years old, I thought. And Gary's not a kid anymore. He's 22, about to start college. And here we are, trapped together in this little motel room for a few days. The thought both troubled and aroused me in a way I couldn't quite define. Logan popped into my head. Logan, I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to visit you, to be with you. But instead, I'm here, trapped in this hotel room with your son. And I don't know how to feel about it. Steam filled the small bathroom, the heat calming my body even as my mind raced. Gary's grin, his easygoing personality, it was kindling something unexpected inside me. Standing under the stream of water, I couldn't tell what this spark might turn into, but I felt something was happening. Later, I decided to go downstairs for dinner and clear my thoughts. I threw on a simple, flowing dress, ideal for the heat, but also something that made me feel more at ease, like I was trying to shake off this odd tension. The hotel restaurant was modest but cozy, fitting for a place this small. I ordered a light meal and a glass of wine, hoping it would help me relax. By the time I finished eating, the sun had set, and the streetlights outside twinkled softly. Sitting there, my mind kept drifting back to the room upstairs. I wonder what Gary's up to right now. Someone as restless and full of energy as him surely wasn't having much fun being stuck in a cramped room. And yet, his casual, carefree attitude, so effortless, so natural, was driving me mad in a way I couldn't quite describe. When my wine was gone, I gave my plate one last glance, then made my way upstairs, taking slow, deliberate steps. As I approached the room, everything was eerily quiet. I turned the doorknob and stepped inside, then froze. Gary had taken a shower and was now resting on the bed, wearing nothing but a loosely tied robe. He was completely knocked out, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The robe had slipped open slightly, revealing most of his toned, athletic frame. His damp hair fell over his forehead, and a small, relaxed grin lingered on his lips, as if he were dreaming. My heart started pounding. It was the last thing I expected to walk into. For a moment, I hesitated beside the entrance, unsure of what to do. Inside me, emotions twisted and tangled together. I felt uneasy, yet I couldn't take my eyes off him. Carmen, what the hell are you doing? That's Logan's son. I scolded myself mentally. But my eyes betrayed me, drawn to the section of his robe that had slipped even farther apart. What I saw sent a warm, unfamiliar sensation through me. The tiny size of the room only made things worse. There wasn't another bed. It was either sleep close to him or spend the night in a chair. And in this heat, the idea of a chair seemed unbearable. Taking a deep breath, I stepped further inside. Gary's steady, rhythmic breathing filled the room. I needed to focus, but the chaos in my mind made it difficult to think straight. Okay, Carmen, I whispered to myself. It's just one night, nothing more. This doesn't mean anything. I came here to surprise Logan, and now I'm stuck here. Be rational. Get a grip. I took a few more steps toward the bed and looked down at Gary. That innocent, peaceful smile on his face made my already confused thoughts even harder to ignore. I sat down on the edge of the bed, wondering how I was going to get through the night. Sometime in the middle of the night, a faint sound woke me. Barely opening my eyes, I scanned the room. Gary shifted on the bed, running a hand through his hair, scratching his head sleepily. I found myself watching him, but I kept my eyes only slightly open, pretending to still be asleep. Inside, however, I was anything but calm. Then I felt it. His eyes were on me. My heart started racing. He was watching me. I tried to keep up the act, maintaining the drowsy expression on my face, staying still. But inside, I was buzzing with something I didn't understand. Slowly, Gary reached for the belt of his robe. As he loosened it, the fabric slipped from his shoulders, revealing even more of his toned, youthful physique. The way his muscles twitched slightly with each movement, a peculiar feeling washed over me. I couldn't stop myself. In that instant, I realized two things. I had no control over what was happening, and deep down, a part of me didn't even want to stop it. Gary picked out a pair of shorts from the wardrobe. As he did, he kept glancing back at me, as if trying to figure out whether I was awake. His stolen looks only heightened my awareness. I tried hard not to give anything away, but at the same time, I let the moment take over me completely. After putting on his shorts, he didn't return to bed. Instead, he sat in the chair in the corner of the room and just watched me. Being observed so carefully was both unnerving and exhilarating. I kept my eyes shut, pretending to sleep. But how long could I keep up this act? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat up. When my eyes met Gary's, I made sure my voice didn't waver. "You're making me feel something I can't ignore, Gary." The words lingered in the air between us. In that moment, I knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. Gary's eyes flickered briefly, and then he took a deep breath before speaking. "I don't know, Carmen," he said, his voice low but steady. "We've been living under the same roof for a while now, ever since my dad left. And the more time we spend together, the more I realize I can't hide how I feel about you. You might not know it, but sometimes I can't even conceal the way I look at you. Right now, this feels like some kind of dream." His words caught me off guard, yet they also stirred something deep inside me. Gary didn't look away. His gaze held mine with a kind of honesty and intensity that had me completely captivated. "I need to get up early to get the car fixed," he continued, though his voice sounded like he was trying to convince himself more than me. But his eyes didn't waver, not even for a second. "But right now, I can't take my eyes off you, Carmen. I've never felt this way before." My heart pounded. Slowly, I moved to the edge of the bed and sat down in the chair directly in front of him. My eyes locked onto his. The energy between us was overwhelming, charged with something unspoken. We sat there in silence, the air between us thick with meaning. Then, in a hushed voice, I finally spoke. "Gary," I murmured, my tone a mix of curiosity and challenge. "Are we talking about the same thing?" Gary's stare deepened, as if he wanted to communicate through emotions rather than words. He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said everything. And that's when I knew. There was no turning back. My heart started beating. At that moment, it felt like the whole world had slowed down, leaving just the two of us. When he took a stride toward me, my breathing accelerated. He looked like he was attempting to read my gaze, but at the same time, he was well aware of the wordless pull between us. As he moved closer, his hands grabbed my waist, and the warmth of his touch felt like an electric current rushing through me. Without uttering a word, he leaned forward, his gaze descending to my lips. I didn't object. I couldn't. Everything about this seemed natural, like it was supposed to happen. When his lips finally reached mine, all the tension inside me melted away. His kiss was gentle and exploratory, yet it carried an evident intensity. My hands involuntarily sought his shoulders, feeling their strength and warmth as they encircled me. The distance between us completely dissolved when our breaths intertwined. That moment felt like an eruption of all the unspoken feelings between us. Gary's freshness and vigor met with the depth of passion I had held over the years. It was the start of something, a beginning both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, there was no disguising what we felt for each other anymore. I let myself fall back onto the bed, my body weary but my thoughts racing. My breathing was still unsteady. My foot brushed against the fabric of my garment lying on the floor. I felt Gary's eyes on me, a strong and calm intensity flowing from his stare. A minute later, he stooped down and scooped up the garment, his fingertips delicately brushing over the spot where my foot had been. Even that simple act sent flames through me. He held the garment for a second, hesitation flashing across his face before being swiftly replaced by resolve. Tossing the clothing aside, he slid his hand to the edge of the bed. Slowly, he crawled onto the mattress, his motions meticulous, deliberate. As he moved closer, the expression on his face reflected his emotions. Equal parts eagerness and magnetic desire. Lying on the opposite side of the bed, I sensed Gary's proximity. My heart continued to race. My breathing intensified. When I watched him bend toward me, I knew that the space between us had nearly vanished. It felt as if everything had reached a breaking point. There was no turning back. What I felt inside me at that moment was overwhelming. It hurt, yet it delighted me at the same time. I looked up at the ceiling, catching sight of Gary's face. I was drawn to the way he pushed back his hair from his forehead with his hand. His eyes revealed everything. His face was flushed, he was thrilled, and he was utterly joyful. He was doing everything with such enthusiasm, and I was struck by the way he was out of breath.